Welcome. Today we have David Leadbetter to join our Play Life Better podcast. David is a leading PGA coach and has led numerous players and has amassed over 20 major championships with his clients. Author of multiple best-selling books and has Leadbetter academies all over the world. So. As avid golfers as we are, it's great to be able to spend some time with you today and ask you some questions and see if we can get any words of wisdom to improve our golf. But you as yourself, growing up as a professional and then a coach, who were your main influences and helped you develop to where you've got today?
Well, actually, I grew up in Africa, and although I was born in England, I grew up in Africa and spent a lot of my formative years with people like Nick Price, and a few other degenerates out there, as we call them. But so I had a sort of an education in golf where through playing mainly and through probably I just had a sort of keen knowledge. I was seeking knowledge, I would say, even at a very young age. I had my nose in instructional books and what have you. And so I turned professional. I was very young. I was 18 when I turned pro. So, and the truth being, I was actually 17. So it was sort of the typical UK approach to sort of becoming an assistant and seeing what we could do after that. So it was really, I had designs on playing. I was a decent player. And my game was getting better. So I thought, well, whatever the case may be, I like the golf business, shall we say. And coaching and teaching have always been somewhat instinctive to me, somewhat natural to me. I always was able to see things, and probably in my own case, it probably made me a little too much of a perfectionist from a playing standpoint, which you realize at the end of the day, you can't, as Bob Rotella, the famous sports psychologist, says, golf's not a game of perfect. So, but I think probably trying to find out the holy grail of the golf swing, the game, shall we say, how to score better, really drove me on. And I did a lot of educational courses in the early years in America and what have you. And then I had some success with friends of mine, people like Nick Price and Dennis Watson and Mark McNulty, are all from that neck of the woods. And then obviously I was fortunate enough to hook up with Nick Faldo, and that sort of turned my career around. And people say it turned his career around, but it sort of turned my career around more than anything. So it's been a long journey. I've been around a long while now, teaching for many, many years. I mean, I just figured out the other day that I've been teaching for nearly 50 years, which is amazing to me, because it feels like yesterday in many respects. But it's it's a very satisfying profession, because all right, maybe it's the next best thing to actually doing it yourself, playing, but to actually help players along of all levels, not just tour player caliber, but of all levels. It's a very satisfying profession. And, it's nice to put a smile on people's faces if they win a major, if they win the Open, or if they break 100 for the first time.
Fantastic, yeah. And you referenced Nick Faldo, and Nick Faldo, I would say, would be a perfectionist. And would he have been one of your most exacting clients and demanding on improvement? Because he seemed to have a tremendous work ethic as well.
Yeah, that's probably true to say. I mean, he had a tremendous work ethic. I mean, he was bound and determined. I mean, look, his whole goal when we got together, I mean, I actually had played in a couple of tournaments that he played in sort of when he was very young. But so I knew of him, and I knew obviously that he was Britain's blue-eyed boy as far as, okay, this guy's going to win multiple majors, etc., etc. Well, his sort of career stalled to some extent, and he was looking for something that really was enabling him initially to win the Open. I mean, that was the thing. He said, listen, I want to win an Open, and needless to say, he won 3 of them. But he really was a stalwart, and he was bound and determined to say to make these changes, to improve. And probably, if we had the technology like you guys have out there at Education City, which is an amazing place, by the way. I've been scouring the internet and having a look at it. Boy, congratulations on your fabulous facility out there. But I mean, if we had something like that back in the day, although it took us a couple of years, we might have been able to shortcut that process, shall we say. But yeah, there's a lot of trial and error. Even with all the technology we use today, there's still a lot of trial and error as far as finding the right fields for people. And that's one thing I've really, I suppose, my key to success, if you will, is giving people feelings in order to change mechanics. Because in the end, you can't stand there and have 27 swing keys. So you've got to sort of simplify it down to a feel, and you obviously using the talent that the individual has.
And that's a great point. So how do you ascertain a pupil's learning style, or someone approaches you and says, David, I want to go and do this, or I want to go and do that? What's that first consultation like? What do you discuss, and how do you go about it? Because there's obviously people who are visual, there's ones that like feel kinesthetic, like you say, or there's people who are deep into knowledge, and there's others that probably want to keep it very simple. So how do you ascertain that at the beginning?
Well, that's an interesting point, because I think, a large part of what I do is really consulting with the individual and talking to them and discussing and finding out a little bit about them. You can generally tell. I mean, I think when you've been in the game as long as I have, your instincts are strong. If you're dealing with an accountant type individual, or if you're dealing with an artistic type player. And I've always sort of felt that, especially at the top draw level, that many of the instinctive players, it's creative, artistic type players, really have great short games because they have that versatility. And it's interesting, different countries produce different types of individuals as well. I've taught a lot of people from Sweden, and they're a little bit more analytical in their approach. The Slavic countries are, where if you, there again, I've taught people all over the world. I mean, the Italians are a little bit more charismatic, and the South Americans, and so you sort of have to weigh it up. I mean, you can get little tidbits like when people say, "Oh, I see what you're saying," or I hear what you're saying, and you, as say, it's an instinct. I mean, we all use various sensory systems. In fact, Nick Faldo was a perfect example. I never, even all the years I worked with, I never actually worked out which was his strong sensory system, because he had them all working. He was kinesthetic. In other words, he felt things. He was very visual. He was very auditory. You'd always hear him clicking as far as sort of that sort of thing from a rhythm standpoint. So he really had he had the whole gambit, shall we say, of sensory systems to work with. And so, but normally, you find somebody has a slightly stronger system in one form or another. And I think a lot of it too is that, in discussing with players, I mean, even a lot of tour players, they get too mechanical at times. We know these sports psychologists hate a lot of all the technology these days, because they're trying to keep things simple and get them to have a quiet mind. Well, in many cases, it's giving people an active mind. And my argument with that is that, look, if you can get to a point where you're technical to a point where you work on your technique and it becomes more habitual, then you can go out and really not have to think about it. The reason you work on things is so you can forget about things. I always use that statement, and because to say, it is. I mean, you can go on YouTube today, and there's over 7 million pieces of advice on the golf swing. So it can get quite confusing.
Yeah. And that's a good point. You're talking about some of the psychologists, and a lot of the top players have teams of people helping them. So you may be assigned the swing coach, but do you then collaborate with maybe a player's got a short game, or a putting coach, or a psychologist, or whatever? Is there a time where you guys get together to understand what each person's trying to do and achieve for the bigger picture of the player?
Yes, I mean, that is more commonplace now at the very top level. You've got, say, people that are swing coaches, performance coaches, putting coaches, wedge coaches. I mean, it's a whole entourage now, and obviously to get an edge. back in the day, we were sort of a jack of all trades. You sort of did a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And I do enjoy teaching, working short game. But there's some experts out there. People like James Ridgett with wedges and so on and so forth, and James Seekman in America on a short game, and Phil Kenyon with putting. So there are some experts out there, and I align myself with different people. In fact, what I like to do is actually sort of take control of it and then suggest that a player sees a certain individual who I feel will sort of mishmash with them well. Because sometimes, I've had a player work with one of the putting coaches, and it just didn't go down well. It was so technical, and it made him worse in actual fact. And then we got hold of Brad Faxon, who's a good friend of mine, who's obviously one of the greatest putters of all time, who's very much a feel-oriented putter, and they matched up perfectly. So I do that with psychologists, I do that with workout people, and so I try to match an individual with another individual who I think, well, there'll be the chemistry there in order for them to sort of achieve what they need to achieve.
That's again another interesting point. The gym side of it. A lot of the players now are really hitting the gym hard, building up a lot of bulk, building up a lot of strength. Does that cause you any challenges, or is that sometimes on your advice you say, look, you maybe need to strengthen these areas, because it's quite frightening at the moment, actually, how strong these young players are, and the work they do in the gym is incredible.
Well, yes, I'm sure you're referring to Bryson DeChambeau, and that the verdict is still out there. He's doing some incredible things as far as increasing his power ratios, but you never know. Look, these things are always long term. But you can go back in the day to Gary Player, who's always been a fitness fanatic, and swears that the reason for his success is his fitness levels, when he had to compete with people like Jack Nicklaus and Arnold Palmer and so on. But I think, look, I have access to quite a number of different people in that field. And we actually have one of my very good friends is one of the leading biomechanists in the world. His name is JJ Rivet from France. He's actually a consultant to the European Tour. And so he looks at the biomechanics of an individual, and together we work out in tandem with, say, that the swing flaws that I feel are there that keep repeating themselves. Then we work out a plan and get them with a workout expert who can then design an exercise program. Whether it could be stretching, it could be strengthening, it could be speed work. There's a lot of different factors, and there's a little bit of trial and error in all this. It's not golf. Although people are trying to make it an exact science, it's never going to be an exact science. Okay, it really is. It's a lot of it's art form. And you look at the great players of the past. It's only been in the last few years, really, that all this technology has come to the forefront. So you'd have to say, well, was Jack Nicklaus wrong in the fact that he didn't quite understand the ball flight laws as they are today? Or no, it means that the guy had, he had that X factor, which enabled him to put the club face on the ball, and probably, arguably, is still the greatest player that the world has ever seen with his record. So I think we have to realize as coaches that all this technology and everything that's surrounding us now are tools. To enable us to sort of come to a conclusion and an assumption, and hopefully get the message across to the individual in a shorter space of time. Even your high handicap beginner players. We're doing a lot in the 3D world now, creating models that people can actually, almost like a hologram, where there's a lot of work in this area now, where people will actually be able to stand at home and be able to recreate movement patterns, almost like a dance step. Which I've always been of the belief that most people who take up golf, the first thing they shouldn't do is hit a golf ball. Maybe putt or something, but the first 3 months is really important as far as establishing your movement patterns. And a lot of habits that people have were formed in the very, very early stages of their golfing careers, shall we say. So developing the right technique, not worrying about the results so much, obviously, I always use the example, if you take a diver, for instance, and they're working on their technique, well, all they're working on is entering the water at the right angle, maybe doing a pike or a double flip or whatever. But the fact of the matter is, they're working on entering the water. Now, in golf, I mean, you're working on the technique, but ultimately 90% of focus is actually on, well, where's the ball gone? And so it takes away from the actual establishment of trying to develop the proper technique. So it's interesting how learning patterns are really important. And my feeling is, look, if we want to grow the game, we want to guide people into how to play better quicker, but not necessarily first, go out there and whack a few balls around. I mean, that may be okay for a couple of sessions or a bit of fun like at Top Golf or something. But for the most part, it's like, look, if you want to, golf is a game of technique, and we know the better the technique ultimately, unless you're a superb athlete and hit millions of golf balls. But if you can develop technique, it's going to last you a long, long time.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, great advice there, and so true. So breaking down the game into the different components, there's a huge emphasis on swing, or a lot of people come for lessons and they want their swing fixed, but how do you break it down? There's swing, there's short game, there's mental, there's physical, and all other aspects of actually being able to get around the golf course and managing yourself or learning to hit different shots and recovery shots. So how do you look at the sort of holistic approach there?
Well, yeah, that's a good word. I mean, I've always used that holistic approach, and it is a holistic approach. I mean, ideally, you got to look at the individual you're working with and then develop a game plan for them and say, okay, what are your goals? How much time do you have to play to practice? How much time can you spend on it? Can you do some stuff in the evening in front of a mirror, et cetera, et cetera? So some of the technique aspects can be utilized in those time frames, because we know there's so many different components to the game that if you spend all your time on just the one component. I'm not saying yes, certainly to get a swing initially is important, because we know that sort of lends itself into works its way into the short game and pitching and everything else. So the thing is, I think it's really important to sort of look at the balance of things, and some people come on a little quicker in some areas. But my advice is really to coaches that, look, you need to sort of tackle every area to start with, not necessarily going out to play. I mean, because now you're working into things like course strategy and course management and so on and so forth. And yes, if they get to a certain skill level, they can start to work on hitting different types of shots, depending on what the shot calls for. But I think in the beginning, to break it down to a point where, I mean, people have more fun with the short game. They're less intimidated. If they slice it up, they're slicing every shot they hit. Chipping and putting. I mean, many coaches really start with a putter and work backwards. They say, okay, this is the major focus of the game, is to get the ball in the hole. Let's start on putting and then work backwards, which is not a bad idea at all. And especially for high achievers, when we're working with high achievers who think that everything they've done has turned to gold, maybe in their business life or something else, they figure that, well, golf should be pretty easy. Listen, I bought this expensive set of clubs. I'm taking lessons. I'm working hard, and yet I'm not seeing the results. So a lot of times, once again, it's very much based on the coach to decide the plan that's needed for each individual. That's why, in the end, yes, you can learn golf sort of through the internet to a certain extent, but in the end, I mean, there's nothing better than the one-on-one individual approach. I mean, it's like, talk about doctors in the UK now, sort of, okay, just seeing you on, through the internet. Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know how they can actually, figure out exactly what's going on. I suppose you can get to a certain, I suppose, make decisions to a certain extent. But I mean, golf is one of those things where you've got to massage people's egos. You've got to sort of, you've got to encourage them. You've got to illustrate yourself by hitting a couple of shots and doing things. And so, I mean, that in an ideal world, that's the way it should take place. But we know it's not an ideal world. People are busy. People don't have a lot of time. So it's probably, at the very best, it's going to be a blend of stuff that happens sort of on the internet and stuff that we can control by being on a one-on-one basis. But there again, I still think it's really important for a coach, a teacher, to really create a blueprint for this particular individual, depending on their particular talent. Because we've got to remember too that talent plays an awfully big part in this whole thing. Okay, if you've never played any sport and you're not very well, you're not very well coordinated, golf may be a tough game to play to get to a really decent level. But having said that, look, in the end, for most golfers, it's all about having fun, right? If they hit a few good shots here and there, and we're not trying to be perfect, well, they shouldn't be. And that's the thing we have to keep illustrating to people, that, look, even the best players in the world, make messes at times. So the average player, that's why we have handicaps. And that's the great thing about our sport, the fact that you've got different tees, you've got handicaps to play with. It's not like you're playing tennis against somebody who really, if they're really good and you're really bad, you're never going to give them a game, are you? So, it's a great sport from that standpoint.
You're talking about that, people and the time factors and the expectations that they've had tremendous success in other parts of their life. How long does a significant swing change take to embed, do you think?
Well, I always say, look, if you're serious about it and you took regular instruction and you followed up with it and kept in touch with your swing coach, I'd say, depending on the ability level, once again, I would say within sort of 6 months you could see some real improvement. And not necessarily it's going to be 100% consistent, but you will see some good shots, and more than anything, I think, look, the important thing is, as a coach, it's really giving. I always say to people, to students, look, we're trying to make you your own best coach. We're trying to give you the knowledge and understanding that you really own this. Okay, it's not like, okay, well, I'm slicing or I'm shanking you. What's the problem? It's like, we want you to sort of take responsibility and put the onus on the individual, because you're not with them 24 hours a day. So there's got to be times where they've got to figure this out. They go to the practice tee. They've got to have certain drills and things that they do. And people are a bit slack at this. You go to any driving range or practice facility and you see people wailing away without really any plan or purpose in mind. So I say that's why planning is so important. And I say designing something for each individual, depending on what you think they're capable of doing. And, because the way I actually teach, to be honest, is that I almost have a picture in my mind of how I think this person could swing and then work towards that goal. That's really, I've always done that intuitively. And so, especially with better class players, where I can see certain things. You say I've been around a long time, and JJ, my biomechanics friend, says, David, you're very fortunate because you have biomechanical eyes. And so I didn't really understand that at the beginning, but I suppose to some extent, I can see what's taking place. But remember, in golf swings, if you're fixing an issue rather than building, there's a big difference between fixing and building. If you're fixing an issue, you have to distinguish the difference between cause and effect, because if you're just working on the effect, which is largely what a lot of the technology we have today, TrackMan, for instance, even force plates. I think force plates actually are really beneficial because you can actually see a lot more. But even there, it gives us the effect, and so it takes a coach or somebody with a really good eye to be able to figure out, okay, now what's causing this problem? Okay, is it a posture issue? Is it a grip issue? Is it an equipment issue? So there's so many factors. That's the exciting thing for me. It's like, it's an open-ended story here, and every time you come across somebody, it's a whole different set of circumstances which sort of tax one's knowledge and ingenuity, how to actually help that player improve.
And do you to monitor the progress of some of your clients? Do you use some of the analysis or the post-round statistics that are gathered? Do you see improvements in, say, overall driving stats or greens and regulation or fairways hits? Is that something that's important to you as a coach to just measure that?
Yeah, it's really important at the top level, and even at the sort of the intermediate level. I think it puts onus on that player to be responsible about their game, and and certainly to monitor progress, to be able to actually see, well, look, because you can always sort of, people look at swings even on video and say, well, I thought it was a lot better than that, but yet, the results are a lot better. So it's like, what they see and what actually taking place might not necessarily be one and the same. So having some sort of stats and be able to compare, whether it be the number of putts you have or fairways hit, greens hit, etc., up and down ratios. So I think it's important, and we definitely have a couple of systems we use, and one for the tour players, one for the amateurs, one's a little bit simpler, because you don't want to make it to a point where somebody once again gets so involved with their statistics that they lose sight of the fact that what are they trying to do? We're trying to get the ball from A to B in a fewer number of strokes, and so sometimes if somebody really has some issues, are statistics really that necessary at that point in time? Or maybe if they get to sort of a certain level, I don't think there's any point in sort of apart from seeing maybe some basic improvement, but there's no point of 36 handicap getting into statistics, because we know for sure, even on TrackMan, you can look at it. They don't make two swings in remotely the same at that level, and so it's interesting. So once again, I think it is a case of finding something simple. I've always believed, look, simplicity is the key. To be able to keep things as simple as possible. There's players that are more technical now, for sure. And I think young players now grow up with more technology, so they're more accustomed to it, shall we say. But still, it's you do see players that get so involved with their mechanics and tied up with their statistics that literally, they can't take the club back. So they've just lost that sort of intuitive way of being able to sort of hit a golf ball and play golf.
And you've referenced technology a lot in this talk today. You would have started off using video cameras and things like that, and I know you were a great one for using some learning aids as well to help get the feel in there. But now technology's moved an awful lot forward in recent times. You talked about force plates, TrackMan, and such like. Which ones are you finding are giving you really important data and helping you enable your players to learn what or understand what you're trying to get across to them?
We use a variety of technology, and obviously TrackMan or variations of it, whether it be Flight Scope or Quad or whatever. Sam Putt Lab. We're actually involved with a company called Golf Zone, who are the biggest simulator company in the world, who have a lot of data they've collected through their millions of players that have played indoor golf in Korea in particular. They play more golf indoors than outdoors there, so they've got a tremendous number of statistics for different levels of players, which is really interesting looking at. And force plates to me are really, really beneficial. I think you see movement patterns, you see where the center of mass is located, you see weight transfer. So it's really, to me, that's sort of the hidden, how should we say, the hidden aspects of the swing, which I suppose it's like an X-ray compared to an MRI, where you really see in depth what's actually taking place and what the shift in balance is actually creating in the swing itself. So, and we use a 3D system, and that's, in fact, is something we're working on right now, which may revolutionize the world. We'll see in a year or two. We'll see if I come back to me and say, well, what was that you were talking about? But because I say 3D, it's really interesting, just even from a visual standpoint, to actually see what's taking place and to, as I say, quantify even small improvements, because, it's like, 2D video it's okay. It's fine. It's been around for a long time. A lot of it's dependent on how you set the camera up, et cetera, et cetera. It can vary from swing to swing. So it's not that accurate. It gives us a rough idea for sure. But I think when you get into the 3D aspects of it, and you can actually see and turn the body around and be able to see the amount of, say, shoulder hip rotation versus hip rotation, the amount of forearm rotation that might the amount of club face rotation, so the amount of wrist set and maintenance of that wrist set. So it's all very useful stuff. And I say, I think, to me, as long as we don't lose the naturalness of the game, and I think it's that sort of stuff is really important. 3D stuff is really important for injury prevention too. They're finding it in a lot of different sports, no, it's all useful stuff, but it needs a driver, it needs a pilot, shall we say, to sort of look at this stuff and make a true assessment to a point where, because look, I've known people who are very very much into 3D, and they quote numbers and figures, but people really haven't got a clue about what to do with them.
That's interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of data out there. It's now just sort of decoding it and turning it into something of use. And
yeah, exactly.
You're 50 years into this, teaching at a very high level. Are you still learning? Is some of this technology giving you some moments? You see something, go, wow, I never realized that happened in the golf swing. Is there new revelations coming up?
Well, I think to some extent, I mean, yes and no. We have found little things and interesting things. I think from a player to player standpoint, the differences that you see. I mean, we always knew the golf swings were different from player to player, but now we're sort of seeing it and what makes that player successful. I mean, in the end, it's like, in the end, it all boils down to how one can create energy and release energy in the most efficient way. So we're seeing ways to be able to do that, and some of the things is actually, believe it or not, has confirmed some of the things I've always believed through the years, which weren't necessarily, we weren't able to prove. So that was satisfying. So yeah, I mean, it's look, our motto at our academy for our instructors, we have 35 academies around the world. We have over 100 golf professionals who work with us or for us, who are all certified. And our motto is, we who dare to teach must never cease to learn. So even at my advanced stage in this my golfing career here, we'll continue learning. And I think one just has to keep an open mind and realize that, look, what somebody says, I mean, we have preferences, how we think things should be undertaken. But I mean, look, it's all about gaining success with your students, no matter which route you go.
And on that point, you've had tremendous success over the years, over 20 major victories. Would you be able to pinpoint the most satisfying, from a professional standpoint of view, your most satisfying moment?
I've had several, for sure, but I suppose, Nick Price winning the Open at Turnberry back in the mid-90s was very satisfying. But probably, I think all the work that I did with Nick Faldo back in the day really was really satisfying, because it was really, it was an effort on both our parts. I mean, we never stopped. I mean, it was a great relationship. I mean, he was a perfect student, and it was just, we were just striving for this goal. And when it happened, that literally after a 2-year period, when he won at Muirfield back in 1987, I mean, it was really satisfying. I have to say that, because it was a culmination of everything that we'd done, and it proved to the world really that what he was doing was the right thing, because at that point in time, there were many poo-pooers that now he's doing the wrong thing, and I was at fault, and trying to lead him up the garden path. But yet, when he started his success, and he won 6 majors, and probably should have won at least 3 others, I would say. I can think of 2 US Opens he should have won. So it was an amazing success story, and it was all credit to him as an individual, who was so bound and determined and so single-minded, so much to a point that he wasn't the most popular player out there. But he did what he had to do in order to be successful.
Yeah, I think he'd gone on 84. He'd had a great season and won 4, 5, 6 times, and then decided that his swing wasn't good enough, and he
he did. Exactly. Well, we started in 1985, so it was the year after he actually won at Hilton Head, I believe it was, in America. So it wasn't as if he'd had the worst year in the world. But I say he just figured out he was 28 at the time, and he thought, look, if I'm going to do this, I want to make some changes, because when a player isn't happy, somebody like him who's the ultimate technician, and somebody who when he was at his best had complete control over the golf ball. I mean, it was like, hey, he wasn't going to settle for anything less.
And what sort of pressure did you feel? Because I often wondered, you talk about pressure for players, but as a coach, and I know most of the coaching goes ahead at the beginning of the week, but maybe in circumstances with Faldo, you're there on the Sunday with them. Do you feel a lot of pressure when you're there at a tournament with players and maybe something's not going quite right, or they're getting anxious?
Yeah, you do. I mean, look, as much as you have success, there's always going to be periods of time where players aren't playing well for whatever reason. It could be something in their private lives you're not to know, and you feel for them. I mean, look, you create a relationship with players at that level, and you become really good friends, and it's tough sometimes when they're not seeing the result for one reason or another. Maybe they at times do need a different voice, something different that they haven't heard before. It's there is pressure. I mean, I've tried to sort of stay above it, realizing that, look, you're not going to be successful 100% of the time. There are going to be times where even if you've had success with a player, it doesn't mean you're going to have success with that player forever, because they change. Maybe they have an injury. Maybe something happens, and their lifestyle changes. And so, for whatever reason, I can think back to a lot of players who I've had success with, and then they left for whatever reason. And so it's just the way it is. It's the nature of the business. I mean, it's more commonplace now, because I think back in the day when I first started, I mean, very few players had coaches. You have to remember that. And where today, shoes on the other foot, very few players don't have a coach of some sort. And so it's interesting. Somebody like a Justin Rose, who I used to teach for the time 16 to about 23. I mean, he's had not that many, maybe 3 coaches or something since that time, but now he's going alone. He just said, hey, I've got enough knowledge now, I want to figure it out myself. So, who's to say that's going to last forever? But it is interesting how players go through certain periods of time, and coaches, maybe they've got some things going on in their lives that are causing some problems. So it's human nature, and everybody's. I mean, I've never belittled any player for leaving. So, hey, look, you've got to do what you've got to do. I mean, it's all about you. It's not about the coach. The coach is sort of in the background, and I've always tried to do that to some extent. I've never really liked the limelight, because I always figure, look, yes, I've maybe helped and guided them, but in the end, if it wasn't for the talent of this player, there's no ways they would have had the success they've had. So as coaches, we're really channelers and guiders to sort of help them to understand what they're trying to do and hopefully reach their goals.
Fantastic. And one final question. This is a question I ask everyone that comes on our podcast. Our listeners are avid golfers. They're predominantly weekend golfers, and they're striving to shoot their best scores or get the handicaps coming down. So if you got one piece of advice for the recreational club golfer, what would it be?
Well, the interesting thing, I think a lot of it boils down to basics. And so to me, look, if you can get the one area that we have total control over as golfers is the way we set up to the ball. And if you look at all the top players, they all set up to the ball. They look like they're ready to move. They look like they're energized. They look athletic. So to me, if a person can spend a little time in the mirror, getting their setup right, getting their posture right, I should say, getting their forearms to match where the the right arm sits a little lower than the left, where everything's lined up squarely. So when they go out and practice, the fact they put down an alignment stick to make sure they're aiming correctly the whole time, make sure they're aiming where they think they're aiming, rather than reacting to, if the ball's going to the right, they start aiming more to the left there to compensate for it. And I think the final thing to me, because the biggest fault in golf, in my opinion, is the grip. I think 90% of amateur golfers grip the club incorrectly, specifically if they're right-handed golfers in their left hand. What I mean by that is that, you see players, they grip it so high in the palm here. And normally, as a result of that, people who wear a glove wear a hole out their palm. So I would always say to people, look, get it down, not right in the fingers, not at this angle, but sort of at a slight angle, so the club sits diagonally across through the baby pinky finger and just up above the big finger. And if you can lower the club, because the higher it is, that people tend to sort of grab the club. And so before you know it, it's like you've created all this tension, and tension's a killer in the golf swing, So by getting the grip in the right position, getting the hands positioned properly there, it allows the hands, the wrist to work. Because believe it or not, although so much emphasis is placed on what the body's doing and how strong you want to get, there's some great players. You go back in the day, it doesn't matter who you're talking about, the Peter Thompsons of the world or the Henry Cottons, and they all had great hands, so they were able to feel the club head. So yes, we know the energy transfers itself down through your arms and hands into the club, but yet being able to feel your hands is important. So that means, as Ben Hogan said, and I use his statement a lot, and it was different for him compared to a lot of other people, make no mistake, but good golf begins with a good grip. Always remember that, good golf begins with a good grip. So it's really important that you sort of establish a good grip, know what a good grip is, tie that into the way you set up to the ball, and then you've got half a chance of making a decent swing. But the problem is, if you set up badly, you grip it badly, you aim badly, you're really working around some problem areas which you'll probably never fix, and everything from then on in is the result rather than the cause.
Sound advice, fantastic. Get the great foundations in place. So that's been fascinating speaking to you, David. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us here in Qatar. We hope to see you here one day as well.
Absolutely, looking forward to coming to see you. I mean, it's a amazing place you've got. If you can't learn to play golf there, I don't think you can learn to play anywhere, because I've never seen such an amazing advanced setup as you have there. And so, look forward to coming over and seeing it.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for your time. And like we say, look forward to seeing you in Qatar one day.